I am Laura Smith, and I oversee the Connecticut Business, Railroad, and Labor collections in the Yukon Archives. The items I want to talk about are photographs taken in September 1899 of women posed at machinery in the insulating department of the Ansonia Brass and Copper Company in western Connecticut. But first, let's begin at the beginning. As Connecticut labor historian Cecilia Bucky has written, the Industrial Revolution saw the transition from rural farming, small artisan shops, open spaces, and the slow pace of pre-industrial life give way to huge factories, crowded cities, and high-speed machinery, from small, locally based home production to large-scale machine production of goods for a wide market. At the turn of the 19th century, Connecticut was rapidly entering the Industrial Revolution, with the establishment of mills and other manufactories taking advantage of the water power of the state's rivers. The Naugatuck Valley in western Connecticut was the site of the production of clocks, tin, pewter and silverware, buttons, tools, and other household items. Connecticut peddlers sold these goods throughout the state and the region. Dozens of businesses, particularly in and around the city of Waterbury, were cropping up to take advantage of this growing industry. But it wasn't until the manufacture of brass items was developed in the 1820s and 1830s that this region really took off. In the early years, brass goods were made in small shops using workers from the local farms. But as the industry grew, the owners of the businesses sought skilled workmen and state-of-the-art machinery from England. As noted by Bucky, the Waterbury brass industry became so robust, the businesses collectively applied for 1,200 patents between 1808 and 1890 for brass manufacturing processes, designs of new products, and inventions of new machinery. After the building of the Naugatuck Railroad in 1849, the businesses could efficiently bring in raw materials and distribute finished goods, giving them the means of reaching a large market. Anson Phelps came to the region in the 1830s and founded the town of Ansonia near Waterbury in the early 1840s, where he established a mill to roll copper. He formed the Ansonia Brass and Copper Company in 1854, which specialized in making pins from brass wire. As the process for producing brass goods became increasingly mechanized, the industry started to rely on unskilled workers to run the machinery, particularly workers who would accept low wages and endure harsh working conditions. The confluence of this need for unskilled labor and the great influx of immigrants from Eastern and Southern Europe, experienced in the United States beginning in the 1880s, made Connecticut's Naugatuck Valley the country's major producer of brass and copper. As noted by historian William Lathrop, the region became so dominant in the production of brass and copper that by 1880, 76% of all brass products produced in the U.S. came from the Naugatuck Valley. Because these immigrant workers were unskilled, they were less likely to participate in early attempts at unionization and were thus subject to the lowest of wages and almost non-existent worker protections, deadly in an industry that was as dangerous as brass working. In the late 1800s, the workday in these industries was typically 10 hours long, 6 days a week. The hazards of working in these harsh environments increased with mechanization. As noted by Bucky, only skill and alertness kept a worker from catching a finger or hand in the rapidly moving coils of the rolling and wire mills or in the power-driven presses and stamping machines. The illnesses rampant among brass workers included spelter shakes, which was a malaria-like illness with chills, fever, and sweating caused by the inhaling of zinc vapors, as well as asthma, chronic anemia, and tuberculosis. In 1900, women were 23% of the workforce in Connecticut. The average woman worker in Connecticut at that time was single, under the age of 24, and either foreign-born or the American-born daughter of immigrant parents. As was typical of the time, a woman worker usually had to turn her wages over to her father, a married woman's wages to her husband. Some industries preferred women workers for certain aspects of the work because they would accept lower wages, were less likely to strike or resist increased work, and as young women were easier to manipulate. So let's look at the photographs. These photographs were taken at the Ansonia Brass and Copper Company in Ansonia, Connecticut in September 1899. Soon after, the company merged with other brass companies in the region to create the American Brass Company. Here in the Yukon Archives, we hold the records of the American Brass Company, where we found this set of photographs. Let us look at the details of one photograph. Although we do not know the specifics of the work these women are doing, it is evident that it is dirty and labor-intensive. The women have dirty dresses and faces. Over their dresses, they have only aprons to protect them from the grime. There is no visible safety measures that we take for granted: gloves, safety goggles, protective clothing. Even with what we know about what was going on in Connecticut industry and ethnic history in the 1800s, when I look at these photographs, I have more questions than answers. I want to know, what was life like for these working women? What circumstances brought them to these factories? What were their lives like outside of the factories? We do not know these women's names or their individual circumstances, but just viewing these photographs tells us so much about the conditions of women of the working class at that time. And they give us a lot of fodder for other areas of research in women's, ethnic, labor, and business history.